Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, we are going to be talking about the top decks to climb with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel post-ban list. The ban list is coming out on April 1st, which will probably be the day after you see this. So generally speaking, 2 days. Generally speaking, this will be in effect fairly soon. It'll be in effect basically immediately with the new season. I think that'll be a day of wait. But the point is that we're going to go over the best decks with which to climb, not necessarily the best decks holistically. And the ban list did change quite a few cards. I don't think that it had much implication on the actual format, but at the very least, we did get a lot of information from the Duelist Cup to see what the top decks were, at least in the hands of the best players. So let's quickly go through the tier list. Starting off with Gem Knights. Gem Knights I'm going to put into, I have 2 tier 2s here. This should be tier 3, my bad. I'm going to put Gem Knights solidly in tier... Yeah, I'm going to put them solidly in tier 2. The biggest upside to playing specifically the Gem Knights is having access to the Heralds. I know that may seem strange, but yeah, genuinely speaking, the ability to have a hand trap as dominant and has the ability to potentially start your combo, allowing you access to the ability to play on turn 0, is really advantageous. That's a very solid strategy. On top of that, one of the advantages that this deck has is that it does have the ability to play these auto-win cards like Floodgates, such as Aurora Paragon or Fossil Dynapachycephalo, making it a fairly strong deck nonetheless. Next up, we have Primate Blue Eyes, which I think is, at this point, just Rogue. I'm not going to rank just regular Blue Eyes, because it's basically not worth talking about, but the Primate variant, utilizing the Primate cards, it seems that they have transitioned mostly, at least from what I have seen, they've transitioned mostly into playing with the Magia, like trying to play Magia and all of that jazz, which I think is worthwhile. There's a lot of monster spell trap effects that resolve in a single turn. So having the ability to negate that is not necessarily a bad thing. But all in all, it's just kind of like a wombo combo auto win style deck and doesn't really have any of the nuance that it had previously. And it's just been power crept into oblivion. Branded, I'm going to put in everything else. Branded, here's the thing. If we were to look at, I believe I looked at the top decks for the for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel on Master Duel Meta, and there were 3 branded players. This is an extremely popular deck. Now, here's the thing. If you are not good at branded, so much so that you have committed all of your time and energy into only playing branded, it's probably not worth it for you. On top of that, it's just a worse version of pretty much every other deck that we're going to talk about, at least in the fusion variety. It's worse than Draco Tail. It's worse than Gem Knights. It's worse than Luna Light. It just does all of that stuff, but worse. That's it. Maybe I'll bump it up to Rogue, but for right now, it's just don't play it. It's not worth it, like, at all. So there you go. Dark Magician, I think, is fairly decent, but the Dark Magician deck itself isn't exactly extremely powerful. It's basically just Dragoon Turbo, which is fine, but it also doesn't really have any nuance to it. There's not really some additional crazy thing that you get access to. It's fairly one-note. There's not so much that you get to do, you know. The engine itself, as in the new Dark Magician of Destruction, is a fairly solid engine. It's not insane by any stretch of the imagination, but it is at least an engine that can be utilized in a variety of decks. Most notably, we've seen it in Orchest, and it's done pretty well there. But other than that, it's not a great deck by itself. Probably Rogue tier. DDD. I've actually seen DDD do fairly decent. I hope this is DDD. I could not tell you what a single one of those cards looks like. But I've seen it do pretty decently. Again, it's kind of that auto-win style go first end board, where you're just like, cool, here's this big wombo combo. At the very least, it does have a little bit more nuance, because it does have a floodgate that it gets to say, like, hey, no canines just don't do anything. However, again, its biggest issue is going second and bricking. It's still not going to consistently be able to play, at least in comparison to what we've seen with a lot of other top decks. It still has to play a whole bunch of like random one-ofs that you really don't want to draw, and all of these other potential cards. So it makes it a little bit weaker into potential hand traps, right? Especially with the power level of a lot of the hand traps with the with heralds and stuff of that nature. Plus pendulums are always just not great, right? So I don't think it's terrible, but it's definitely not as good. Magnets, I'm going to put in solidly into tier 3. I think they are a clear step above a lot of the other decks above it or below it, and a clear step below a lot of the decks that I'm going to put above it. And all in all, I think it is a good deck. I'm very excited for it, but there are a lot of weaknesses that I've noticed. It's weak into like Troll and stuff of that nature, because even though it does have a quick play searcher, it's also something that only activates in main phase. So theoretically it works, but realistically it really heavily dies to things like any of the Mulch armies and Maxi. It dies to Droll. It is very weak into hand traps just in general. Like Ghost Bell happens to be very strong against it, and that's not an uncommon card, right? And there's a bunch of stuff like that where it's just like, okay, yeah, this ends up just being really, really heavily reliant on some powerful cards. However, its end board is unbeatable. Like, it's insanely powerful. And unlike a lot of these other decks down here, like for example DDD, I feel like it's more resilient to hand traps, but it can also play into established boards a lot better than something like DDD. DDD does struggle with that, whereas magnets just have the ability to kind of push into those established boards. Now, notably, there's kind of two variants that you could play. You could play the Fiendsmith variant, which I don't think is all that worthwhile, or you could play the Block Dragon variant, and I think Block Dragon is just better. So, there you go. Next up, we have arguably the best deck from the last format, and is still in tier 1 in my opinion, Branded Draco Tail. The Draco Tail hits in particular, limiting Lucius. I call him Lucius. Limiting Lucius, limiting Rahu does change the deck at least a bit, and it does make it significantly weaker. However, because of the fact that we still have access to the branded cards, and that we still have access to as many names as we do have, along with all of the different ways to fusion summon, that being Malulu, Phimena, and Cartesia, all of which are still at 3, it doesn't feel like we've lost all that much. And in fact, prior to this most recent Duelist Cup, a lot of players were playing a pure variant without the branded stuff. And if you just add in the branded stuff, the deck basically doesn't change. So for the most part, I feel like it's still very solidly in that top end. This one, though, I will say, did receive the most hits, so it could receive the most change in its status. However, even with that being said, I feel like the decks below are not powerful enough to kind of like either push themselves into that top echelon tier or to pull Draco Tail down. And that's the same thing with a lot of these top decks that we'll talk about. Speaking of which, why in the hell would we play the Magistus cards? I'm going to straight up tell you, playing the Magistus cards just make you weaker in every capacity for Draco Tail. The Draco Tail cards are really advantageous because they play around so many different hand traps. The Magistus cards basically say, what if I made a ever so slightly better end board that also died to like 9 hand traps? It's just a bad idea. Theoretically, it is better because the end board is better. Realistically, it's weaker to a myriad of other things. So it's not really worth it. I just think you're actively hurting yourself by playing the Magistus cards. Next up, Exosister. I'm going to put in everything else. There's no real point in playing this. Fire King, here's the thing. I am a big stan of Fire King. I think this deck is really fun. It's very good. It's very solid. There is a problem with it, which is that it's just been power crept way too much, and it's too fair. Having to play a fair game against, like, Yummy is a nightmare. I'm going to put it in everything else. I don't think it's good for climbing. You probably shouldn't be playing it for climbing. That being said, if you're just the better player, you can play it. But I don't think you are the better player. At least if you are trying to watch this video to understand the metagame and what you could play as a new player, or as an inexperienced player, or as someone who's playing casually, maybe don't play Fire King. Same thing with Branded. Next up, Hero. Hero got a whole bunch of new cards, allowing them access to more things, it's still Rogue. They still lose to the same things. They still die to the same things. They still end on the same things. They still technically do similar things. And you can play them in a myriad of different ways, or you can play them the same way that they've always been played. For the most part, it didn't change much. It's just more hero cards that do more hero card things. That's it. They're Rogue. I don't know. Dark Law's okay. That's... Actually, I'm going to put this on everything else, let's be honest. Next up, we have ourselves our first... I'm going to put Radiant Typhoon at the top of Tier 2. I think this deck is the most well-positioned to climb to Tier 1 and to really be at that top echelon. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that... well, two reasons. One, it doesn't necessarily play into a lot of the standard hand traps, which is always great for a climbing deck. And two, it has a pretty good matchup against a lot of the top meta decks, which means that if you are playing against a lot of those top meta decks, you're not just going to immediately lose. And three, actually, is that it has a really good matchup against a lot of the decks below it on the tier list, giving you even more access to just kind of auto wins, or at the very least, very powerful options. Right? The ability to kind of push through these boards is very nice. So, all in all, I think it's really, really well positioned, but I'm going to put it at the top of Tier 2. Luna Light, I think, is a pretty solid deck as well. Just giving you access to a big towers is pretty solid. It's a little bit more difficult to play, similar to that of, like, Branded. No, it's not. Branded it's a whole nother monster. But it is at least a little bit more difficult to play, but to be fair, if you just summon the towers, you're probably good, right? If you figure out how to do that, you're probably good, right? Because for the most part, people aren't going to have answers to this. Some people will, right? Some people will have some sort of ability to play into your board or to, you know, deal with it in some capacity, but it's going to be pretty rare. Malice is still Tier 3. I think it's still very solid. Still have all of the other Cybers stuff to play with it. So there you go. Melodious is pretty bad. Memento, I'm going to put into Rogue. Memento's okay, but it's not great. Its end board is still very unique and has a lot of varied interaction. Varied is probably not the right term. It has a lot of powerful interaction that comes from a bunch of different places, and it's a very difficult, sticky end board to deal with. So I think for that aspect, it is at least decently positioned. Mermail, I really don't think this is a great deck for climbing, so I'm going to put it in everything else. Exodia, I think is... Exodia has the advantage of being anti-meta, which I think makes it a little bit better for climbing specifically, whereas a lot of these other decks kind of die to similar things. So Exodia I'm going to put into Rogue, because at the very least you could just like open a floodgate, you could just have Exodia Incarnate, and your opponent might not be able to deal with it. And again, it doesn't play into those common hand traps or interactions or what have you, so that's fairly nice. I guess it does play into Impulse. You're right. I'll put in everything else. Okay, so next up I have Mitsu on here. The problem with Mitsu is that basically at this point, pure Mitsu can't exist. Because they have decided to limit prayers, the pure variant of Mitsurugi is basically not capable of being played. Because one of the reasons you would play pure over some sort of variant of Mitsu is that with pure, you would be able to gain access to more of your Mitsu cards, and you could like cycle more of those cards, utilizing them instead to win the game with like multiple prayers and, you know, multiple Murakumos and what have you. And now you just can't really do that. You do have to play it with some sort of other engine. With that being said, the best engine is still likely Yummy, because even though Yummy also got hit, you still have access to Herald of Orange Light. Not Herald of Orange Light, sorry. You do have access to that. Not in this deck. Sorry. Herald of Arc Light, which is the one that sends and searches a ritual, which is very easy to go from Mitsu into Yummy and kind of go from there, and the Mitsu end board is still very powerful. That being said, I'm going to put this one in probably... We'll see how the rest of this shakes out, but for right now, I'm going to put it in tier 2. At the top, near the top. We'll come back to that. Rescue Ace exists, but is not very good, not really worth playing. Here I have Ryziel. Ryziel Onomat is on here. However, no one is playing Ryziel Onomat, and I honestly don't think that there's a reason to play Ryziel Onomat. So for the most part, while this does say Ryziel Onomat, I'm actually going to declare that this is basically Ryziel Mitsu, just the most powerful Ryziel variant. And Ryziel Mitsu is basically unchanged. Yes, the 1 prayers does matter, but you still have a lot of access to both Ryziel and Mitsurugi for your engine. You still have the ability to search out Habakiri alongside additional other cards like prayers, right? Or not prayers, mirror. And then you also have the ability to use the Ryziel cards to get into the Mitsu cards and the Mitsu cards to get into the Ryziel cards, giving you an easier access to both of those. They're just a very, very solid pairing. We saw that they did really well in both the Duelist Cup and the Rated Duels. It is a very well-positioned deck, and I think it's better than potentially Yummy post-Banlist, but we shall see. I think it did better than the Yummy Mitsu variants in the Duelist Cup. So, again, it's just very strong. Sky Striker, I don't know, tier 3, probably below Magnet, I think. It's okay. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's well positioned. The metagame is too diverse and has too many extremely powerful combo decks for me to say that this is a good option, or at least like a great option. I think it's fine. I think it works, obviously, right? It's tier 3. Tier 3 is not bad, right? But I do think that it is weak for climbing, simply because there's a lot of decks that you're going to have to play against that just kind of have auto wins against this deck, right? And Shifter still exists, which randomly will come up. So, there you go. All in all, I don't think this deck is horribly positioned. I don't know why Sword Soul's on here. Let's be honest, Sword Soul never did nothing. Vanquish Soul K9, I believe, is still one of, if not the best deck. Actually, I still believe that this is the best deck in the room. And in fact, with the limitations to the other decks being slightly harsher, cosmetically harsher, I believe that this is the best deck in the room. The problem is, you got to be good at the deck. You actually have to understand how to play the deck. As we see, Tatsuku, a phenomenal player, ended up winning the entire Duelist Cup utilizing Vanquish Soul K9. The reason for that is because Tatsuku is a really, really good player. And while there wasn't a ton of representation from Vanquish Soul K9, that does not necessarily discredit the power level of the deck. I think it is more a testament to the difficulty of being able to play that for hours on end. And I think that is why it likely didn't see as much representation. All in all, though, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this deck for climbing, and so for that reason, I think that Draco Tail is a little bit better. Azamina, I'm going to put into Rogue. It's a solid deck. I'm not ordering these, by the way. It's a solid deck. It exists. It's fine. I don't think it has too many upsides, though, right? If you want to play some big Wombo combo deck, you could play Yummy or Ryziel Mitsu or Vanquish Soul K9 or Gem Knights or something else. Hell, Malice is arguably better. That being said, no, there's no real reason to play this deck. I'm not going to lie. It kind of can play around Fua, but so can pretty much every deck right now. I don't think there's a deck that doesn't have the ability to play around it in some capacity. Or at the very least, give it, like, few draws. This is one of the few decks that technically can, but also, I don't know. It's fine. I don't really have too much to say about it. I have 3 Yummy decks on here. I don't know what Yummy Fiendsmith is doing. I literally have not seen this in any form of representation. So I'm just going to put it in tier 3 and forget about it. Here's Yummy. So here's the thing. Yummy Pure basically doesn't exist. So I'm going to declare this one is... this one's Yummy Mitsu, right? I guess it could just be Yummy Pure. Sure. Yummy Pure is a deck That does exist. That's true. Why is the Fiendsmith? You know what? Let's just do this. Sure. Something of this variety. The Yummy variants are pretty strong. That's all I will say. As far as, you know what? Okay, here. This is Yummy Mitsu. This is just pure Mitsu. Mitsu kind of sucks now. As like a pure variant. Let's do that. That makes a bit more sense. And then this is obviously Raizio Mitsu. Hopefully we're all on the same page with that. Soulful Cord, Yummy, is the best deck in the game. Period. Hands down, no questions asked. It's the best deck to climb. It's the best deck to play. It's the best deck, period. Herald of Orange Light. Herald of Arc Light. All of the Soulful Cords. The ability to go into Cupsy Yummy Way off of the Soulful Cord cards. All of the Yummies are still basically playable, and while yes, Cupsy Yummy did get limited, it doesn't matter too much because, simply put, you still have access to more or less the entirety of the combo, utilizing any of the other cards. You still have the same number of names that were previously being played, which means that you still see the Yummy cards as often as you would have previously seen them, because most players were playing not the maximum copies of Cookie or Lollipo. Most of them were playing 3 Cookie. Not all of them. I don't think any of them were playing more than 1 Lollipo. So you just swap the numbers and bada bing, bada boom. You're back to the exact same things. It is arguably weaker because not starting with Cupsy Yummy does matter. However, when everything else also got weaker, this didn't really change much. Not enough to be noticeable, right? And it's not like all of these decks got weaker in a sense that something else came into the metagame to like threaten those top decks. Nothing did. The top decks are still the top decks. Speaking of which, Odeon is, I'll put it in tier 3, probably above Sky Striker. It's just a control deck. The limitations to the Solemns literally did nothing, except for showcase that Konami hates traps. Because yeah, guess what? As it turns out, you can still draw the traps. So if they're a problem, I don't know what the limitations do, because now people are still going to have to play into them. And they're still going to be frustrated. So, also Iron Thunder exists, so you could just play Iron Thunder, which is literally just Solemn Judgment. It's not exactly, but it is. It basically is. So I don't know. I don't know what the point of that was. Anyway, Orchist. Orchist, I believe, is actually tier 2. I think it's a pretty solid deck. I think it's pretty interesting. The main advantage that this deck has is the fact that it can droll itself very effectively. And it means that if the opponent does end up drolling you, you can kind of just laugh at them and be like, ah, ha, anyway, and then do your whole combo, which is pretty cool. Droll is very popular. Very, very solid card. So, yeah, being able to play around that is pretty strong. It's also one of the more, I don't want to say powerful, but like, all of its effects are very strong, right? The steal effect is very strong. The send effect is very strong off of Dingirsu, and then you have the counter trap as well, and then on top of that you could potentially have the Fiendsmith line going into DD High Wave King Caesar, Wave High King Caesar, whatever his name is. Also very strong, solid deck nonetheless. Synchron, yeah, I'm gonna put in everything else. This deck doesn't technically do anything, or I should say, it technically does everything, but it also dies to everything, including itself, which is the downside, right? Theoretically, it can play through anything. But in that same vein, it can also die to anything, and it tends to do that more often than not. And I think that is more so the issue, is that it just kind of dies to everything, including itself. So, there's that. Archmage. Here's the thing. You can play Archmage with K9, and if you're playing it with the K9 cards are pretty good. This deck's not great, though. But the K9 cards are. Archmage overall, without the K9 cards, are like bottom of everything else. They're really not that good. But in regards to with the K9 cards, they're fairly decent. All in all, though, that is the deck. If you're wondering what these are cards we do not have, so we're not going to talk about them. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think there are a clear top set of decks. And then you have like variations of top decks that are just weaker, right? The Yummy Mitsu, the Yummy Fiendsmith, the Draco Tail Magistus, stuff like that, as well as some of the other top decks alongside them. And then you have some decent, okay options to climb with, right? Like, I don't think Man is necessarily bad to climb with, right? All of these, I will say, you can get to Master 1 with pretty much anything, right? Like, almost anything you can genuinely get to Master 1 with if you're just better, or if you have a nice build, or something of that matter, right? Where things really get interesting is kind of past that, right? And this is mostly a list of ease. It's going to be significantly easier to climb with Yummy Sulphur than it is with Archmage. That doesn't mean you can't. It's just, or maybe it's easier for you, right? It's just a matter of this is going to be easier. Hopefully that made sense. Anyway, I'm going to call it quits there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comments if you guys agree. If you think that I missed one, let me know if I missed a deck. But that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.